What is going on, everybody? Hope you are having a wonderful week so far. Before we start the podcast, please, not please, if you'd like to get involved with the community that I have started running on Discord, it's really interesting. Things are growing over there. People talking. We discuss everything about the podcast to new things that I'm releasing, new music, exclusive things, we've released some food shows on there by the time this comes out. So the link is in the description. Go get involved if you are interested. And also if you want to hear any new artists coming on the podcast, if you want to suggest anything, let me know in the Discord under the podcast section and we can get things moving. So podcast time. Sian, very good friend of mine. I have worked with him for many years. He is the owner of Octopus Recordings, and it's kind of an iconic label in the indie dance techno scene. He is obviously an amazing DJ, an amazing producer, and one of the nicest guys in the industry. I really like sitting down and having conversations with him. I feel like we always see eye to eye and try and work things out in this industry when we're like off mic, and it was just really interesting to get this conversation on mic. So without further ado, Sian, Mr. Sian, what's cooking, man? Alive.
How are you? Long time.
I'm good. Yeah, it's been fucking ages since I've seen you. When was the last time I saw you? When was it? I think it was 2021.
20 years ago?
Literally.
30 years ago?
I feel like it's been that long. I think it was 2021.
Probably 2 years, man.
Fuck.
It's a long time.
Well, now you're in Vegas, which we should talk about.
Yeah.
You got out of the hellhole of LA.
Exactly. LA is feeling a little crazy lately. I mean, I know you and I have talked about this, and a lot of our creative friends are moving too. Yeah. But LA just feels like it's a brain drain. Like a lot of cool people are moving out of there. Obviously, the crime and the homeless situation is just out of control.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where, everyone I know has had a few incidents, but when it's right on your doorstep, you're like, I don't want to pay this much money for living in this kind of a place.
Yeah. That's the thing that I really struggle with LA is like, I love playing there. And honestly, when I'm there, I get a lot of work done. When I go to LA, it's just like work. And it's like strict, like, okay, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to meet this person and just like get shit done. But fuck me, it's a hard city to live in now.
Yeah, man. Yeah. It feels really sketchy. And obviously with, the economic stuff on the horizon, a lot of people are resorting to crazy things. I mean, I could tell you stories all day about things that have happened to me or my friends over the last few months. And that was it for me. It was just like a few things happened and I was like, that's it. This is so sketchy. And this is like, I'm talking about living in a nice area and paying quite a bit for rent that just does, you've just got like homeless people and chaos on your doorstep.
It's just really sad as well.
That was it.
For me, it's like just really sad to see.
I love LA.
Yeah, I struggle with the fact that we're completely helpless as a society. It's like how seeing these people be in these situations, to be in homeless in a world, not just a country, but in a city that earns so much money through taxes and everything like that, and yet it still can't help the people in it. And there's just something that's very like barbaric about it. I really struggle with it.
Yeah, man, it wears you down when you see it each day. You're driving through West Hollywood or Beverly Hills, and there's like literally people with bags of designer shit stepping over someone like having a seizure on the pavement, and just like, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah.
It's the fourth richest economy in the world. Yeah. That's including countries like Switzerland and shit, and they can't do anything to help. It's just like, in the last year, it's got out of control in LA. But I mean, I love California so much. It's, it was always somewhere where I wanted to live. but then it just became this kind of apocalyptic hell in every area. So yeah, crime is out of control there right now.
Yeah. I was just in New York, and a lot of people, like, I've heard a lot of podcasts talk about it where, like, they're saying New York's kind of gone out of control as well. But in comparison, New York's not. It feels like kind of the normal New York again, apart from it's just got extremely expensive, but everywhere's got expensive. The whole world's got expensive. So I don't know what that is, but yeah, in comparison, New York's on the homeless front is nothing in comparison to LA.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Other states dump all their homeless people in California because if you ask someone who can't afford their mental health care or has a drug problem, where do you want to go? There's like, well, you know, I can get free food and live on the street in California in the nice weather. I can go and live on the beach in Venice. But, you know, New York in the winter is brutal.
Yeah.
So California is where all the homeless people from America come. And that's what we as like LA residents have to deal with.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's a lot. It is a lot.
Yeah.
Well, you're now in Vegas.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's one of those weird places where I always wanted to live for a little while. Like since I was a kid, I'm kind of into that Americana, like old school vibe. So coming here also, it's so weird in terms of music. I feel like obviously there's a lot of commercial music going on here, but there's also opportunities to provide the locals with a lot of cool stuff. You know, there's a giant industry here for entertainment and like bars, restaurants, clubs. And all the people working them are pretty clued in to good music, and they go to different cities and things like Burning Man for good music, but they don't have anything locally really that's like, you know, apart from the Elation guys and all those like Holy House and all those guys are doing great things. But I feel like a weekly party here would be pretty cool for good music. Like there's not really indie dance and techno and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing because I think a lot of people look at Vegas as a place where it's just you just visit and you leave, but then forget that there's a whole city of people who grew up in Vegas, live in Vegas, moved to Vegas. And do you know Fergie, actually?
Not well, no. I've talked to him a couple of times online. Yeah, but I must reach out and say hi. Yeah,
you should reach out, fellow Irishman. You really should. He moved there a long time ago, and he does the whole residency. He's like a resident at one of the big clubs there. He loves it. He absolutely loves it. Out there.
You know what's so cool about Vegas is, I mean, apart from Nevada being a purple state, which is like, I don't care about extreme right or extreme left. In the middle is where normal people are with
totally agree.
Like sane people. You know what I mean? And Nevada is completely that. Like it's kind of cowboy. It's kind of high roller. You know what I mean? But it's the only place where people are building these really futuristic things. Like I guess you've seen the Sphere and then all the super clubs, you know, all of these crazy art installations and all the stuff that's happening downtown quite near here in the arts district. Like nowhere else in America is doing that at the moment and putting that kind of crazy money into stuff. Like there's a lot of interesting things happening in tech here as well now. There's tons of people from LA moving out because they know in a few years the train is going to be running. That they've been promising and all this stuff they're working on to connect LA. And I mean, I've done the drive in 3.5 hours. So if I need to be in LA, I can go there. And Vegas is half the price of LA for like way more for your money.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's been since COVID, I guess. You've seen all these cities kind of pop up. Like Austin is a classic example, right? It's like, look where Austin is now. Like Austin's nearly the same price as LA, with you just get a bit more. You just get a bit more space. But like Denver, again, another one. Montana, like all these people just leave in Cali because you just get a lot more for your money elsewhere.
Yeah. Even I've heard of people moving to really interesting places like Idaho and building like small
Yeah.
scenes and stuff there. Because it's just tons of warehouse space lying empty. So they
Yeah.
just go there and build these big studios and start parties, like Boise in Idaho. You know what I mean? Like weird
Yeah,
places like that.
I've heard Boise,
Obviously
Idaho.
Portland.
I've heard Boise,
Mm,
Idaho has some like an interesting scene kind of growing. I've like met a few people and they're just like doing some weird shit up there.
yeah, it's so cool. I really like that idea because I mean, we forget when we live in a big city like LA or New York, we forget how jaded, you know, when I was living in Barcelona for a long time, we'd just be like, oh yeah, it's just Ricardo again. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And it's like you forget that that's something really special, that you shouldn't just be like, oh yeah, it's just a DJ playing in a club for 100 people again. In any smaller city, that's like a big deal,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it's really interesting because you're 100% right because LA, New York, San Francisco, maybe not San Fran as much, San Diego, you like, and then you got Chicago, and maybe Austin a little bit now, but they're like doing 3, 4 massive DJs a week in each city.
Mm,
Some like if you look at Brooklyn in New York, you look at Brooklyn Mirage, you look at every like what gray area you're doing. You like people are promoters are putting on such massive shows on a weekly basis that you're just kind of
mm,
like it's hard to comprehend that as a club goer to be like, okay, I have to go out every weekend. Whereas when
yeah,
you build these smaller scenes, and it's weird with Vegas now that you're there, but it's really interesting because I feel like you have the tourist scene and then you have the like the residence scene, and it's very different. Because
mm,
I don't feel like
yeah,
the residents that live in Vegas go to the big clubs on a regular basis. It's more so let's go downtown, let's go to some like really interesting nights, and then
yeah.
experience everything else, which is definitely different. Vegas is definitely an interesting scene right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of one thing that I'm really missing is club culture, as opposed to people going out once every 2 months to some
Yeah,
big event with like, you know, stacked up two big DJs back to back so that ticket sales are fine,
yeah,
you know, and like that's something that I'm seeing is club culture, like, you know, a 300 cap venue with interesting new acts every week as opposed to just the same big names, you know, one big event each
yeah.
2 months. I'm not sure if that's something that you're noticing, but I kind of miss club culture where you go to a place and you see the same people, you know, you pick up on ideas,
Yeah,
exchange like thoughts and grow a local scene.
yeah.
I feel that's such an important thing that's a little bit lost now.
Well, I think you're 100% right. I think it's similar going back to what you do with Octopus and what we started out as artists and DJs, and it was more so about the community rather than the big headline shows. And I think where we're at in a market of we can, if you're successful in the music industry or have some sort of a following, you want to grow that and you want to keep building and building and building, which means when you build, you get more and more money, right? And that's the goal for
Mm,
everybody. However, in these like 300 cap spots, it's really hard to pay these massive DJ fees now. It's really hard because their value is
mm,
so high. So you start to
mm,
like actually lose club culture. And what is club culture?
mm,
Club culture to me is a community. And it's very like you have in these like big shows, like let's say for instance, like what Cross does at like Petco Park, where they just have like one headliner and they sell, or they have like one headliner and then 3 big artists below, right? That are
mm.
all headliners in their own right, but just on a smaller scale. And
Yeah.
they sell 10,000 tickets, right? In those 10,000 tickets, you have a bunch of small communities. However, it's not really like one club community that you used to get. Like I remember in Bristol, like growing up, like you'd go to Timbuktu, you can guarantee every Saturday night you'd see the same faces there, and like you'd know each other and you'd build friends with the community. And as the DJs, is like you'd become residents and people would know you, and then people would want to like hear you play certain records, and that would be like the record of the club for that month or for that summer and things like that. You don't really get that anymore.
Yeah, which is really detrimental, because that's where all the next big stars come from. So
do you think, though,
if you're choking out a scene and limiting it to the 10 big names playing, you know, in each city every 3 months to be a safe bet for promoters, I think what you're losing is who's going to be the next Chris Lake and Fisher, or who's going to be the next like Richie Houghton, or you know, and those people, you need to find them locally. It could be some kid in Boise, Idaho, who's just like super talented but doesn't have a community to grow in, you know?
I think I totally agree with you. I think in counter to that, what I'm seeing, and I'm pretty sure what you're seeing as well, is that the community's not built on actually building a community. It's built on numbers, and it's built on data. And I mean that by Instagram followers, real views, TikTok followers, TikTok views, blah, blah, blah. So it then also then goes into that question is like, are new artists really concentrating on the music that they're making or the content that they're making? Because it's the content that actually makes them popular.
Yeah, exactly. And it becomes, you know, are you an influencer or are you a musician? Like, are you making memorable tracks or are you making reels all day? You know, and that's I think where the divide is between music for adults and then music for like kids going out to big events, you know, and that was a huge part in why we at Octopus like stepped away from the whole Beatport top 10 techno thing, because we felt like, okay, these shows, you know, I felt like I was going out and I was playing to a bunch of 20-year-olds holding up their phone. There's nothing wrong with that if that's the kind of show you're going for, like a spectacle, you know. But if you want to play to adults who are like dancing and, you know, exchanging cool ideas and developing, like, as we were talking about, a culture, then that's a different type of thing. Like, you're not just churning out cookie cutter top 10 techno tracks. That's more about bringing in new ideas and taking like huge chances. Like, for example, stepping away from that could have been like career ending for a lot of reasons for all the artists that we work with. But a lot of the people that we're sticking with are making music that's somewhere between indie dance, techno, house, whatever, just literally good music that doesn't really have a genre, so it lands in indie dance, you know. And that's where interesting labels like Diynamic or Elm fit in to the plan, because they're cross genre and they don't distinguish and don't shoot for like big social stats and all the social media stuff. They're just like, these are good tracks that'll stand the test of time, you know.
How, on a business front of that, for running a record label, how does that stand with financials and kind of like actually running a record label that's lucrative?
It's a long-term plan rather than a short-term gain. So it's like you've got to go to the ropes for a year or two and take the hits, you know, and say, okay, we're going to probably lose some of our fans that we're expecting like the next, you know, Beatport techno top 10 hit from the label, because techno changed into something very EDM that we don't do. So that kind of caught up with us, and all of a sudden we're like, where are we? Like, what are these other records that we're being lumped in with in the future? That's not where we want to be, you know. So you kind of sidestep that, and just for a year or so, I think you've just got to transition and gradually introduce music that takes you into the right category again and get back to your roots, you know.
Yeah, I
And
really,
obviously that's like, you're not going to make as much money from label in the first year of doing that, because you're going to have all these people who are like, okay, where's the top 10 techno hit, you know?
yeah, I guess also the question is like, how do the artist on the label feel about that as well? Because I think there comes with your label, there's from an outsider's point of view, right? And obviously I talk to you, so I know what you're doing with the label. But like, I think it's easy to be lumped in as the techno label, right? Because that's what you have been for so many years and what you've done really well as a label. I guess the question is how do you A&R that when you're signing records with artists that still expect you to be that techno label?
Well, it was kind of natural actually to move into doing that, because we just kind of focused on the slightly more experimental and more indie dance side of what we did, because we were always doing that all along. But then we'd have these big dance floor hits that are working in techno. But now we're making more like hits in indie dance that are leading us into that area where it's kind of like the no genre stuff belongs. So A&R in that was not so hard actually, because the artists that we wanted to continue working with completely are on board with that.
Yeah.
And then the artists that were wanting to do more of the like straight, you know, typical techno stuff, just continued doing that with other labels as they wanted to. And it wasn't actually like, we didn't have any incidents where people would be like, oh wow, what the fuck is this? We just talked to everyone about it and said like, this is what we want to do. It's going to take a while for us to, you know, to figure this out exactly in terms of like label nights and stuff like that. But with me releasing on Solomun's label and now with Maceo Plex's label, like that's kind of part of the plan to make that tradition like more solid, you know, to give us like that basis where we're not only the top 10 techno hits label, you know what I mean?
No, I agree, and I think it's really important, and I'd get really interested to get your opinion on this, is with the other artists on your label signing to other record labels and signing to, what's your thoughts on that?
If it's the right label, it helps. I mean, we found that we were being the label where, for example, not to name names or name drop, but we caught a lot of artists, like for example, Nicole Mudaber's first big hit was with us. Same with Julian Joel and a few artists like that. You know, we were catching a lot of people on the up, and then at a certain point we felt like, oh wow, like they're super commercial now.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't really reflect where Octopus wants to be, because alongside having those kind of hits is a stupid word, but you know what I mean, like a record that did well on Beatport, let's say, those artists were all transitioning through us, and we were working with all of those people who ended up on much more commercially savvy labels like Drum Code and stuff like that. We were working with a lot of those people early, and then they went on to do bigger, more main room stuff that doesn't really fit the Octopus sound. So we were in this weird position where we were having a lot of people, you know, come through us and go to other labels, which I thought was amazing for their careers. You know, it's not something that I wanted to do. You know, I didn't want to continue making the same sounding records, because a lot of that, you know, a lot of genre-based music, whether it's trance or drum and bass or progressive or house, can sometimes end up sounding quite similar.
Yeah, I agree.
So with us, we were like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And maybe it's just like a character flaw with me, but I'm always like, okay, that's cool, but like we got to get some new sounds in and bring some fresh ideas in there.
Is there a ceiling to that?
Yeah, do you mean like, is there a certain point where you say, okay, this person's like more, you know, they can go further with another more commercially minded label? And I don't mean commercially sounding. I think, you know, there's a lot of great big techno labels out there, I mean, drum code is still killing it with that sound.
Yeah.
But when they go to that sound, then it becomes something that's like bigger than us, like more main room than us, you know, because Octopus is always like the weird kid, the kind of strange approach to one foot in the main room, one foot in the back room, you know?
No, and I think that's what I mean is like, and I really respect that, but it's, for me, is like on a, I guess talking business wise, right? Is there a ceiling to where you're at, or are you happy with where you're at, where you don't want to be the drum code?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have the commercial aesthetics to be a big label like that. I think we are always trying to be independent and always trying to be first with bringing in new ideas and new sounds. I mean, we're not afraid to release a track that has a commercial sounding vocal as long as it's something that fits in our world, you know? And I think, to answer your question, there is a point where you're like, I mean, of course, some of our tracks pop through and do well in streaming and in download sales, but it's always bringing in enough money to keep the label healthy and flowing really well. And I think for a long-term play, that's safer in my eyes, because a lot of labels have a 2-year period where they're super hyped. But then everything starts to sound the same and they go down. Like it happened with drum and bass, happened with progressive and a lot of genres over the years, where when you can kind of see it when everything starts to sound very similar and it's super hyped, that is like the tipping point usually, you know. And for us, I would rather be a weird, you know, evolving label that's always there and always present over time, releasing interesting music, rather than hyped for 2 years and then you got to do something else, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think there's also comes a point where if you're constantly evolving to a certain extent, you never really get pigeonholed into one thing. And I know you guys were that techno part of it, if you know what I mean. And that's what you were doing really well. But I think if you, by being a bit more forefront, I agree, there's a commerciality to having a sound that definitely is. Like, let's just name a few of the labels. Like, you know what you're going to get with Hot Creations, right? You know what you're going to get with Drum Code. You know what you're going to get with Defected. You like, there's certain record labels that are extremely successful financially and at growing artists that will always do that. And when they find their niche, and then they just home in on it. But I think there's also needs to be like, there's, without sounding like a bit of a dickhead, there's no real like artistry in that sense, where for me personally, it's my opinion that it's like you're buying into a sound then, and that sound might be what you absolutely love. And like, we've all got friends on all of those labels that are extremely successful, and they do their own thing. But I feel like, and I had it with Dirty Bird in my career, like I was buying into a sound to have to grow as an artist in that world, and it worked very well for me. But there comes a point when you start pigeoning yourself into a sound, and then you can't get out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, if someone said to me, "Oh, who's your favorite DJ?" You know, there are always people that are cross genre. Like, if you said, "Okay, what's Solomun's genre?" You know, he goes from disco to techno in a set, through trance, indie dance, like straight up pop music, house, everything. He's just a selector, you know. Same thing with Maceo Plex, same thing with Tiga, or any other artists like that who can cross genres, and it's just Tiga's sound. It's just Solomun's sound or Maceo Plex's sound. I feel like that was always my ambition, is to be one of those artists who goes from, you know, slower tempo stuff to higher tempo stuff.
Yeah.
No matter what the genre. And if you are on, you know, if you're on a massive progressive house or, you know, drum and bass label over the years, and you're known for a sound, if you show up to one of your shows and try and divert from that or add some variation into your set, people are like, what is this? I paid for techno, you know?
Yeah, and it's hard as well, because also you're fighting against the promoters and you're fighting against the press and you're fighting against all of that, of like people putting you in that box, which is totally understandable. You have to be put in a box to sell you to a certain extent. There has to be a level of like box fitting to sell you in any way, like in anything we do, right? Like even clothing, you have to be put in somewhere.
Totally.
But there also comes a point where it's like, if you do the same thing over and over and over again, that is what people expect every time.
Yeah, and there's a time limit on that. You know, there's a problem where when that sound isn't trendy anymore, then that's like an issue, because you're on that ship that's going down, you know. And that's, I mean, who am I to comment on whatever anyone's career choices in whatever genre? But I feel like with any genre of music, I always see that there's this moment where something's super hyped, but then everyone associated with that is kind of stuck with that, you know?
Yeah, I guess a classic example is the EDM days, right?
Yep.
And there was a moment. And the thing is, I always find, though, the people at the top of their game in that genre survive. They always come out well to a certain extent. Let's say, for instance,
by starting to play techno.
Yeah, but like, let's say, for instance, like, what's the guy's name that cakes people? Steve Aoki.
Yeah.
Like, still doing very fucking well, right? Came out of the electro house EDM days, still doing really well. Like, techno, TikTok techno has become EDM in the grand scheme of things. It's not necessarily EDM's become techno, it's the other way around. And I think with like Will Sparks and this is no disrespect, but with what Will Sparks is doing, what Hardwell are doing, and what those guys that were like huge in the EDM scene now, because there's actually like no correlation between what the EDM sound is and what techno is now, the like lines are being blurred to us, also to a certain extent, of like the level of show business, like the Afterlife guys. And this is, I'm not talking shit, like I'm just genuinely being real. Like if you're selling 20,000 tickets to, like, there's a level of expectation of what you have to give them. And it turns into EDM. Like, however that gets packaged. And it's not a bad thing. It's a fucking great thing. At the end of the day, all these people are earning an absolute fortune and doing what they love, which is great. But I think it's fashions of how things are boxed in to be sold. And techno is that thing to be boxed in now, and being a techno artist sells tickets. So everyone's a techno artist, no matter what they play. They're not necessarily playing techno.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I mean, the guys Tale of Us have had such a long journey to get where they are now. Like, you know, I'm sure everyone knows the backstory of how long they've been doing this and how long that Carmine was in, you know, working in the industry for other people and, you know, being behind the scenes and all that stuff. But at this point, they've hit on something that's so commercially viable. It's like the evil genius, you know? It's so so packaged and easily identifiable and so focused on social media that, you know, it's really interesting what they've done. And techno has become a force in EDM, like in terms of business. So
it's weird. It's really strange.
That itself is a trend, and it all looks very, very, you know, like genre specific.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just in Ibiza a couple of days ago, and watched the Holo show, the Eric Bridge show, and it was amazing. You're just like, this is unbelievable. But there's also a level of it where I'm like, how many of these people are here to listen to the music and be part of the music or be part of the show, the like spectacle of the visuals rather than actually like being interested in the music.
Yeah. It's interesting. A guy the other day, I was introduced to some people and they were like, oh, you're that DJ, whatever. He's like, we're going to this show in a few weeks. It's, I don't know if you've seen it. It's these guys, they have these like humanoid things and they like touch, and then there's all these explosions and this like, people melting and turning into flowers and whatever. And I'm like, you mean Afterlife? And he goes, yeah, I think that's what it's called. It's like two guys, I think they're DJs. And I was like, so you're going to see like a visual show? Is it like Cirque du Soleil or something? You know, it's like, it turned out he was talking about Tale of Us, Afterlife, and Anima. And it was weird that the first thing he spoke about was the spectacular show, as opposed to, I'm going to hear some DJs tear it up.
Which it's kind of interesting because like I'm not hating on it and I'm not also loving it, because it's two separate things. It's too like from what we started talking about at the beginning of this conversation, where it's like building club culture back and like, but like then you look at that side of things and you're like, well, there you're appealing to so many more people that don't even care about the music. This isn't about the music. This is about almost like, let's say, for instance, like Meow Wolf. Like, how is Meow Wolf and like Otherworld, like all these like interactive art spaces changed the art world, where it's like people that are into art go to art galleries, right? But like not everybody is into art galleries. So how do we create something that we can sell way more tickets to and it's still art? And it's like, okay, well, let's create an interactive art space and let's create a story in that interactive art space where people can get involved and like people can walk around and take pictures and do all of that. Like, that's the difference really, is like, totally. And I think what a lot of these things are doing, and I think it's also the case of, because they've got so big, but not just them, but like a lot of acts like this have got this big, where it's they actually have to give something else than just music, because I don't care what other, like, musically it doesn't really evolve. It stays very linear and it's very similar to like every release that they do. You know what you're going to get. They market it and package it so perfectly, but like so when you're doing that, you almost have to give them something extra, because they have to be part of it. Has to be a bigger show because more people are coming and you have to appeal to more people.
And I think you and I talked about this at one point. DJs are not the most exciting thing to watch on a stage from a big audience.
No.
Like, if you're watching a band and you're watching someone throw down on the drums and like thrash on a guitar and whatever, like the visual of a band on stage performing with instruments is much different to someone behind, some spec on a stage bobbing their head with some like LED wall, and I think at that scale, what the Afterlife guys have achieved is bringing something into the like performance arena that is more than a DJ show, or it's like an audio-visual like spectacular,
I agree, which is really, it goes on to like what Fred Again's doing, where he's kind of doing a mixture of both, where he, not when he's DJing, but when he's doing his live show, it's like a mixture of band and visual, which is like, again, takes you out of the club. It takes you out of that kind of small club culture situation, but then puts you into festivals and arenas and things like that. And but you have more to watch because he's talking on the microphone, he's interacting with instruments, he's doing all that. And obviously there's been like countless amounts of dance acts that have done similar, but that's where he's kind of like, because I feel like, let's say for instance Justice, right? Justice, absolutely insane dance act, but then they never really spoke on the microphone, they never really like interacted with the crowd. It was like, you're just getting fucking amazing music just slamming in your face, right? With this amazing stage built around them and everything like that. There wasn't really many visuals as well, if I remember rightly. I can't really remember.
And that's what I was talking about earlier. And I know we always idolize the Chemical Brothers, but Chemical Brothers at Coachella was a testament this year to how the music should drive the show. Their visuals are incredible. Like they do, you know, very interesting, unique, arty, experimental stuff, but it's mixed in the way that the music is obviously the key part. And the visual is like complementary to that. And that's what I really love about acts like Justice and the Chemical Brothers, as opposed to, you know, the Fred Again thing. I've seen him live and it felt kind of like a variety show. Like he'll, you know, get on the phone with people, have these other people talking. Like the whole thing didn't feel as powerful as just losing yourself in like a 2-hour Chemical Brothers or Underworld or Justice set, you know?
I agree. I think also with let's compare them both, and who are we to compare them both? But realistically, like Fred is a very personable human being from a fan's point of view, right? Like you see him on the social medias talking very openly, like you see a lot into his personal life or what he wants to show you.
It's your friend, like social media access for that generation.
Whereas you look at the Chemical, and also like the music that he's releasing, of like, it's very communicative, it's very like bringing people together, it's very much that. Whereas you look at the Chemical Brothers and it's just strict business. Like it's strict, like this is what you're getting. You're getting amazing visuals, you're getting amazing music videos, and you're getting fucking mind-blowing music.
You're gonna sweat.
It's two different products, isn't it? But done both very well. Like even with The Tale of Us and what Eric Prydz is doing, all very different to the three. Like there's 3 products there that are all very different. Because you could, like for me personally, I could listen to a Chemical Brothers set live and be absolutely amazed without even watching the visuals.
Totally.
I think that's the difference for me, is the music is just unbelievable.
And also, I mean, let's keep in mind that we're talking about dance music, and the original concept of this is like the energy level, you know, and taking people on a journey and all those cliches. And that, I mean, who is comparatively doing that sort of energy level performance? You know, when you look at Justice and Chemical Brothers are still active, but for new blood and for new ideas and, you know, upcoming artists, are there many people that have that kind of insane energy level? I mean, when you look at a show, for example, if it's just Fred Again on his own, it's very mellow. Like it's kind of just like a variety talk show kind of thing with some music. Whereas you see him with Skrillex, who's bringing that other side of the energy, then it's like a rave. You know what I mean? And I feel like that sort of energy level is what I'm getting at. Like I miss that in dance music.
I think it also goes back to that DJ culture and the TikTok culture that we're kind of going through right now. Is like it's very easy nowadays to put, and I feel like a broken record on this podcast saying this, and I'm sure you talk about this to your mates all the time as well, and I know we've spoke about it, but it's like it's very easy to have a small amount of success by finding a Britney Spears sample and putting a massive techno kick drum over it. It's so I think like that's the difference, is like people want success to be people want to be famous. It's not about making the best possible music. It's just about being famous. And I think that's the issue in the DJ world right now.
Yeah, and I mean, that comes from a culture growing up looking to influencers rather than looking to artists, and that bothers me, I gotta say. Like when you talk to a kid and you say like, okay, what do you want to be? You know, like a guitarist, or you want to be policeman or an ambulance driver or an astronaut, whatever, and they say, I want to be famous, I want to be an influence, and you're like, famous for what? And they're like, I don't care, I just want to be like, I want to have loads of followers. And you're just like, well, what's your ambition? Like, what are you trying to do with your life? Like, well, what's the fucking point of existing if you're not trying to achieve something? Like, success, okay, there's a cheap way to get there. You know, you just do a record that sounds like all the other big records out there, you know. But to actually have some purpose in your mission, that gives your whole existence meaning to me.
So I'm just going to open the door, but keep talking. But just because it's fucking hot in the studio right now. England is hot for once.
Yeah, no worries. Wow. Jesus, that could be a first.
I know, right?
So,
yeah, I agree.
Speaking of hot.
Yeah.
Speaking of hot, you know, Death Valley was 132.
Yeah.
132 Fahrenheit.
That is so hot.
A record.
It's so fucked. I don't know.
I went out. I was in Phoenix a few weeks ago. I went down to the store in the middle of the day. My sneakers were melting on the pavement.
Are you serious?
It's that hot in Vegas now as well. So like if you go outside and you put your your sneaker down on the hot part of the pavement that's been in the sun for a few hours, it literally melts your soul. Like, it's that hot.
Fuck that, man. Fuck that.
Like you go outside and you're just like soaked.
You don't like the heat as well?
Sorry?
You're not a fan of the heat as well, are you?
No, I actually like it. Yeah, I hate the cold.
Oh, really?
I probably was whining about that when we hung out before. I hate cold. Like, I'll take heat over cold anyway.
I'm the opposite. I love cold weather.
That's crazy.
I can't wait for the winter, man. I thrive in the winter. I thrive in the winter. It's so strange. Weird. I don't know why. Like, today's beautiful. Today's like 24 degrees in the UK, which is
it's nice.
80s. Is that 80s or is that 70s?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice, but I don't know. The world is getting hotter. Climate change is real right now.
Yeah, man.
Definitely.
It was in the 50s here recently, just like consistent, you know.
Yeah, it's mad. I want to go back to that artistry thing though.
Yep.
How do you create like artists, not like fame chasers? And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way to people, because I think realistically it's just a different time, right? We're just growing up. The way we grew up DJing and producing was like the geekiest thing ever, and it wasn't cool to be a DJ and it wasn't cool to be a producer, and it's only got cool realistically in the last like 5 years, where and realistically I think what happens is it's actually still not cool, but you only get shown the cool parts of being a DJ and being a producer on social media. You only get shown the private jets, the playing in front of thousands of people. They don't talk about the countless days in a studio, the rejection from every fucking record label, the like rejection from every promoter, the rejection from every agent. They don't show any of that. No one talks about any of that struggle. And also just how to pay your rent at the beginning of your fucking career when you're trying to become a producer and trying to become a DJ. But how do you kind of create that? Because I think that when bands like Daft Punk, Chemical Brothers, Justice, when even like Blaze and stuff like that, like when they came out, it was just a different time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And also keep in mind that they had CD sales when they started. So you could get some money from a record company because they would make it back on physical product.
Yeah.
Whereas now you can have every song in the world for $9.99 a month.
Yeah.
So the artists get fuck all from that. Excuse my language, but I think that directly correlates to the genre you're in, right? So if you're in techno at the moment, you're either the underground, like warehouse 6 a.m. type artist, or you're the TikTok techno, EDM techno person who's chasing the shows with those big labels who will plot out a stage for a festival promoter, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to be that, then your day is going to be doing social media stuff, right? You're going to be thinking about reels and TikTok stuff and all that shit. Whereas if you're in a different genre, like if you're releasing on a, let's say, an indie dance or an electro label or something, you're going to be making music and you're probably going to be doing a lot of smaller shows. But they're going to be way more quality in terms of the people you're playing to are going to be music fans. They're not standing in front of you waving their phone and can't remember what your name is, you know? And I think that's something that people need to decide earlier on. If I was going to give, I mean, advice is worthless a lot of the time, but I feel with new artists, they should decide that, like, where do I fit? Like, am I this like more commercial techno person, or am I the more alternative end of techno, like more indie dance leaning? And that, you know, is where everything from deep house to electro to techno lives. That doesn't fit in the other boxes for festival, you know, like a specific commercial festival sound.
I think it's
so
also
I
think it's also really hard, isn't it? Because I think the like more artistry route, like what you're saying, the indie dance, like the Chems vibe, right? If you were going to go, I'm just using the Chemical Brothers for example because we've been talking about them, but like if you're going to go down that route, it takes a very long time to get to that level. And it takes a lot of hard work of writing the right records to get to that level. Whereas to be the TikTok techno person, it can happen very fucking quickly because you're going for that viral moment, right? Whereas when you're actually making albums or you're making EPs or you're making records that like probably most DJs aren't going to play, but you're trying to find fans that listen to them. Let's say, for instance, Rufus the Soul on the more commercial side of things, right? Like they've been doing it for years. I think their first album was like 2014. And you're like, okay, it's nearly 10 years. And now they've got to the point of where they're playing stadiums. However, they weren't playing stadiums for they've only been playing stadiums the last 4 years. But it's like, are you I guess the question is what do you want out of this industry? Do you want longevity, or do you want something that's going to last, give you 5 minutes of fame, earn a bunch of cash, and then get the fuck out of here because you can't get away from it?
Yeah. And, you know, easy come, easy go. If you're going to get famous for one track really quick, that's probably a trend-based thing, and that's probably not going to be around in 3 or 5 years. But if you look at the artists that did build huge careers in indie dance, like, you know, the Solomons or the Maceo Plexes or the Miss Kittens or whoever, they're going to be around forever. And they've had very, very fruitful careers from making music that's true to their taste, as opposed to, okay, this is hot, I'm going to make a track like this.
I agree.
And this is going to sell, and I'm going to, like, you know, a lot of young artists that are coming up in commercial techno, their managers are literally reinvesting their first year of fees or 2 years of fees into social media. They're not doing a lot of intelligent things with that, I don't feel, because that's kind of like a cash grab for management. And artists are coming out of it thinking, okay, I'm super big on Instagram, but as we all know, Instagram influencers aren't successful financially. They just get a lot of free shit and they get a lot of shows and whatever, but
especially
they're not
in music,
doing like big paydays, because all of that money is being put into inflating the social media machine, you know.
Especially in music, I feel like I feel it's weird because there's people that are influencers that are outside of music that can earn a very big fortune from their following.
Yeah, gaming and stuff.
Gaming, food, like clothes, whatever it is. Like there's tech, but for some reason in the music world, like you're not paid to use your following, which is really interesting. And I think there's like a part of me, there's a level of like, okay, yes, you should be promoting your stuff because it's your music, right? But then there's also that argument, okay, let's say for instance a record label or a promoter, like no one's getting paid to post about their shows. Yes, you're getting paid to play the show, but like realistically, it's an interesting concept because I think there's arguments against both, right? So like, let's say for instance, a record label, if you had 1 million followers, the record label's signing you because your followers, you have a lot of followers, right? But there's realistically signing you for your music. So then should they be also paying you to use your platform to promote your music? Or is that part of the deal? Likewise with promoters, like are promoters paying why aren't promoters going, okay, in this deal, so you have, let's just say for instance, you have $1,000 deal, okay, and we're going to give you an extra $1,000 to post 5 times about the show. Like, because at this point, artists are bigger than promoters in a lot of sense. Artists are bigger than a lot of record labels. Record labels don't have the culture. They don't. Spotify doesn't allow them to have the culture on these platforms where you're like, oh, it's another whatever, like it's another Dirty Bird record or it's another Hot Creations record. It's like, or a major record label. They don't have the power behind the culture.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's ever going to go that way.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see more tech companies working with music artists at an underground all the way up to the top level, to try and coordinate them using their followers more. Because like sometimes you're like, we're like paying for ads on social media and we've been gathering all these followers, you know. I think you're right, definitely promoters could monetize that a little smarter.
Yeah, I agree. It's weird. It's a catch-22, and I know there's an argument against it because it's like, well, you need to sell shows.
Again, I mean, musicians get in the crap end of the stick again.
Always. What do you think that is?
It's just that artists, I've thought about this a lot, and I feel I have this theory. Artists are usually nice people, right?
Yeah.
And they want to do their thing, which is make music and perform music.
Yeah.
And if someone comes along and says, hey, you want to do this show? They're like, yes, straight away. They don't think like a tech or a gamer person where they say, how much are you going to pay me?
Yeah.
Artists don't have that in them a lot of the time. That's why we need managers.
Yeah.
To be like, hey, wait, listen, you've got something, they want it. Don't just give it to them.
Yeah.
Don't just say, here, take these records as pretty much as promotion, because royalties are so low and streaming numbers are so janky and hard to account for. I think it's difficult. Artist personalities they're not their best manager.
No. Yeah, it's weird.
Not their own best manager.
It's really weird, but it's also the music industry fucks the artist purposely. Like we all went to Spotify to put our music out, yet they screw every single artist, not just dance records, not just dance artists, every artist, because of that's how it's weird.
Yeah.
It's something I heard an analogy ages ago about it, and it's like going into an art gallery and there's a Picasso on the wall and being able to pick it up and put it in your bedroom for free.
Yeah.
And that is what the streaming platforms are doing. And like, I know there's streaming platforms that pay better than Spotify, like, but they're all just as bad as each other in a certain sense, where like, to generate,
it's devalued.
Yeah, to generate any finance realistically, like let's say for instance, 1 million streams on Spotify generates $3,500, and then let's say for instance you're then in a 50-50 deal, which is a kind of a standard independent deal nowadays, 50-50 deal. So, and then the labels put $1,000 behind promo. Let's just say promo, artwork, everything like that is $1,000. Out of that, you then have to recoup that. So that's 2,500. And then that 2,500, you get 20% taken out of from the distributor. And then the label takes 50% of that. And then the rest of that, your manager takes 20% out of that. And maybe a business manager, it takes 5% out of that. So realistically, out of 1 million streams, you're probably generating $1,000 at the beginning. Yeah. Your first 1 million streams.
Yeah. You know, it's mind-blowing. I've talked to a few guys I know in Germany who were running labels like, you know, underground techno labels in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And they were selling vinyl. They were telling me that they were getting quarterly checks for 250,000 equivalent US every year. And that's for about like 10 years. So like they were running, you know, well-known enough, but underground labels. Like they weren't having, you know, they weren't like having these huge like Jam and Spoon type dance hits that would cross over into the charts. They were doing like cool underground records that you would know of, but they weren't, you know, they were big in Germany and stuff, but they were getting 250,000 approximately US each quarter minimum for like a 10-year period. And they're all driving like crazy cars and using that money to reinvest in artists and starting their own festivals and all this stuff. And like those were labels that were nowhere near as big as like records you've had or we've had on Octopus. Equivalent, like if you say, for example, you know, number 1 or number 2 or whatever on Beatport would have been a huge deal if you're selling vinyl and CDs. So, I mean, it goes without saying, it's just a different era.
Yeah, different
But
era.
without physical product, the artist is further screwed. You know?
And then it goes back to merch then. It's like, how do you create a foundation as an artist to sell merch? And how do you create a label that has a community around it that wants to buy merch? Because that's the only physical you can do. And occasionally the odd vinyl or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I know all we have is now we do 1 vinyl a year. And then this year we're starting to do merch now, like on a monthly basis. But it's like, there has to be something to generate that money to be able to invest into the artist on the label.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Like even, you know, bigger bands or electronic artists are all facing the same problem. Like what, you know, your shows are your only source of income really, because streaming is like unpredictable and small amounts. So it's becoming really weird like that. Like, you know, imagine we developed a blockchain system where you were actually fairly paid per play. That would bring like a whole new generation of music into play.
Well, I think
that's a whole other debate, right?
Yeah, but I also like the idea. I know you've got to bounce in 5 minutes, but I also like the idea of like artists taking on their own kind of platforms and creating their own communities and almost like taking that middleman out and having the like Patreon, the OnlyFans, whatever that is, like to be able to promote that and get people to subscribe and grow something where people are involved, and also those are your super fans. Obviously you can't do that on a mass scale, or you can, but like, what is a mass scale? It depends on the artist size. But imagine you had 2,000 people paying $10 a month because they loved your music that much that they wanted to be fully involved. I feel like there's like a level of like, okay, you can survive as an artist with that much money coming in.
Totally.
And like you can do interesting things for your art, for your fans and for that. But I still think there's not really a platform that packages music up in a way that can be done.
Yeah.
It's always subscribed to the website. It's always subscribed.
Yeah.
It's not ever subscribed to the artist. It's follow the artist, but pay us.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's because every song in the world is available for $9.99, or actually nothing if you're choosing like a free model of Spotify, which is disturbingly high number of people don't even pay for Spotify.
Which is also really disturbing to me, is that a podcast is allowed to put ads on their podcast, right? Like, and on their Spotify page, a podcast can do that if you're big enough. Whereas as artists, you can't put an ad at the beginning of your song. Imagine you could. Imagine you could. Imagine we could put an ad at the beginning of every single one of our songs. And let's say, for instance, like my biggest record's done 12 million. Like that's way more than what most podcasts do. Like, let's say Joe Rogan does an average of like 5 million downloads. Like, imagine what you could generate from 12 million.
Exactly.
You're talking like 50 to 100 grand a fucking record.
I know. Yeah.
That's the thing for me.
Or even at the end of it, just run an ad at the end of it. But that's what, that's the freemium models that are just broken at the moment,
But that's the thing.
The way that during the pandemic, we did really well from Twitch because we had an ad share on revenue,
Yeah, I think something's got to change. Something's got to change. Not too sure what that is, because realistically, let's be honest, as shows go on, inflation's gone up. It costs everyone more to do shows. It costs artists more to get to the shows, and our fees aren't necessarily going up. Everything else is going up, but fees aren't necessarily going up.
And less people are going out.
Exactly. So you're just like catch-22. It's interesting, man. It's interesting. I know you need to bounce. I feel like we could carry on for another 4 hours.
Yeah, man.
We've got a lot more to talk about. So we'll have to do this one again.
Totally, man. Anytime.
But
it's a pleasure talking to you as always.
Thanks for coming on, and let people know how they can get involved with the label, how they can hear your music, how they can do all of that.
Yeah, man. Great. I will do.
And big love, man. Hopefully, I'm coming to Vegas soon.
Hopefully, I'll see you soon.
Yeah, I'm coming to Vegas soon, so I'll let you know.
Great. What day? Keep me posted.
I'll let you know the dates. I'll let you know the dates off. But yeah, keep safe. Keep doing your thing.
Cool, man. I'll see you soon. All right.
Peace.
Good stuff. Thanks,
Cheers, man. Bye. And that's a wrap. Big love to Sian for coming on. Thank you for everybody listening. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to get involved in the community. Share the podcast if you loved it. Keep safe. See you next time.